A woman with terminal cancer was abandoned by her husband and son. Months later, she left a letter that would change their lives forever. You'll be amazed by this true story of emotion, but don't forget to subscribe to the channel to attract 10 years of good luck. The sun rose over the skyscrapers of Boston, bathing the city in a golden glow that heralded a new day full of promise. On the 20th floor of one of these imposing buildings, Sarah Armstrong, a 45-year-old woman with a presence that radiated confidence and determination, prepared for another day leading her successful technology company. With her perfectly styled black hair and impeccable business suit, Sarah mentally reviewed the day's agenda while having her morning coffee. Her assistant, Rachel, entered the office with a stack of documents and a nervous smile. "Good morning, Sarah. Here are the reports you requested for the 10 o'clock meeting. And there's something else." Rachel hesitated before continuing. "Dr. Thompson called. He says it's urgent that you contact him." Sarah frowned, remembering the routine medical tests she had undergone the previous week. "Thank you, Rachel. I'll take care of that right now." With a knot in her stomach that she tried to ignore, Sarah dialed the doctor's office number. Dr. Thompson's deep voice on the other end did nothing to calm her nerves. "Sarah, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. We need to discuss your test results." The doctor's serious tone made Sarah's heart race. "Can't you tell me over the phone, doctor? I'd prefer if we discussed this in person. Can you come this afternoon?" With a resigned sigh, Sarah agreed. "I'll be there at 4. The rest of the day passed in a haze of meetings and business decisions, but Sarah's mind kept wandering to the impending medical appointment. At 3:30, she excused herself from a board meeting and headed to Dr. Thompson's office. The antiseptic smell of the place and the sepulchral silence of the waiting room only increased her anxiety. When she was finally called into the doctor's office, Sarah had to gather all her strength to maintain her composure. "Sarah, please, take a seat," said Dr. Thompson with a somber expression. "The results of your tests have revealed something we need to discuss urgently." The following words fell like a hammer on Sarah: cancer, advanced, terminal. Each medical term was a blow that left her breathless. "How long?" she managed to ask in a whisper. "With treatment, maybe a year. Without it, 6 months." Sarah felt the world crumbling around her. Her mind, always quick for business and strategies, now seemed unable to process the information. "I need you to consider your options, Sarah," the doctor continued. "There are treatments that can." But Sarah was no longer listening. Her mind flew to her family: James, her husband of 20 years, and Michael, her 18-year-old son. How would she break the news to them? How would they face this together? She left the office in a state of numbness, walking through the streets of Boston as if she were a stranger in her own city. The buildings that once represented her success now seemed like monuments to a life that was slipping through her fingers. She arrived at her home, a mansion in the outskirts of Boston's affluent Brookline neighborhood, and paused in front of the door. Inside, James and Michael waited, unaware of the emotional tsunami that was about to hit them. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed her suit, and entered, preparing herself for the most difficult conversation of her life. Dinner was served, and the aroma of Martha's cooking, their lifelong housekeeper, filled the air. James, an attractive 50-year-old man, looked up from his tablet and smiled when he saw her. "Honey, you're late. Everything okay at the office?" Michael, absorbed in his phone, barely mumbled a greeting. Sarah looked at both of them, feeling a love so deep it physically hurt. "We need to talk," she said with a trembling voice. "It's important." James frowned, noticing for the first time the paleness in his wife's face. Michael, finally, looked up from his phone. "Mom. What's wrong?" Sarah sat down, took her husband's hands, and looked at her son. The words came out like a torrent, broken by sobs she couldn't contain. She told them about the diagnosis, the limited options, the time she had left. The silence that followed was deafening. James, always strong and decisive, seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. Michael, with tears in his eyes, abruptly stood up and left the room. "We'll figure this out," James finally said, squeezing Sarah's hands. "We'll look for the best options, the best doctors. We'll fight this together. Sarah nodded, grateful for her husband's immediate support. But a part of her, the part that had always been realistic and pragmatic in business, knew this was a battle she couldn't win with strategies or resources. That night, while the house slept, Sarah remained awake, looking out the window at the garden she had so carefully cultivated over the years. Every rose, every tree, was a testament to her life, her dreams, her legacy. Now, faced with her own mortality, she wondered what would remain of her when she was gone. With the determination that had taken her to the top of the business world, Sarah made a decision. If this was the time she had left, she would live it to the fullest. She would make every moment count, not just for herself, but for those she loved. As dawn painted the sky in pink and golden hues, Sarah managed a faint smile. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to face it with the same strength and grace with which she had faced every challenge in her life. What she didn't know was that this challenge would not only test her own strength but would also reveal the true nature of those around her, for better or worse. The days following Sarah's diagnosis were an emotional roller coaster for the entire Armstrong family. The news spread like a whisper among the company employees, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and concern. Sarah, however, remained firm, determined not to let her illness dictate the rhythm of her life. One morning, while reviewing contracts in her office, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Amy, her cousin, with whom she hadn't spoken in months due to their busy schedules. "Sarah. How are you? I've been thinking about you lately," Amy's warm voice filled the line. Sarah hesitated for a moment. Should she share her situation with Amy? Something in the familiarity and affection in her cousin's voice prompted her to open up. "Amy, I have to tell you something." And so, Sarah shared her diagnosis, her fears, and her hopes with the only person outside her immediate family. Amy's reaction was immediate and comforting. "I'm coming over, Sarah. You don't have to go through this alone." Meanwhile, at home, James struggled with his own demons. Sarah's diagnosis had shaken the foundations of his perfectly ordered life. Sitting in his study with a glass of whiskey in hand, he mentally reviewed the plans they had made together, the trips they wanted to take, the company's expansion, the bright future they had imagined for Michael. The sound of the door opening pulled him from his thoughts. It was Michael, with reddened eyes and a determined expression on his face. "Dad, we have to do something. We can't just sit here while Mom..." James interrupted his son with an abrupt gesture. "And what do you propose we do, Michael? Do you think I'm not looking into every possible option?" The tension between father and son was palpable. Michael, always protected by his parents' success and strength, felt lost and scared. Maybe we should look into alternative treatments or take her abroad." "With what money, Michael?" James exploded. "Your mother handles the finances of this family. Without her..." The words hung in the air, loaded with a meaning that neither of them dared to fully face. The reality of a future without Sarah was beginning to take shape, and with it, the fear of losing not just a loved one, but also the lifestyle they were accustomed to. At the company, Sarah faced her own challenges. The board of directors, concerned about the future of the company, pressed to know her long-term plans. Sitting in the boardroom, Sarah looked at the expectant faces around her. "Gentlemen," she began firmly, "I understand your concerns. My health is an issue that affects us all, but I assure you that the company is and will remain in good hands." As she spoke, Sarah realized she needed to make crucial decisions, not just for her family, but also for the hundreds of employees who depended on her. That evening, arriving home, Sarah found Amy waiting for her. Her cousin's embrace was like a balm for her tired soul. "Sarah, I'm here for whatever you need," Amy said with tears in her eyes. "We're going to face this together." Amy's presence brought an immediate change to the family dynamic. James, initially grateful for the additional support, began to feel displaced. Michael, meanwhile, found in his Aunt Amy a confidant and a shoulder to cry on when the weight of the situation became unbearable. One afternoon, while Sarah rested after a particularly exhausting chemotherapy session, Amy confronted James in the kitchen. "Where have you been, James? Sarah needs you more than ever." James, with bloodshot eyes and a slight smell of alcohol on his breath, responded bitterly, "And you think it's easy? Watching her fade away day by day, knowing I can't do anything." Amy looked at him with a mixture of compassion and reproach. "Nobody said it would be easy. But pulling away isn't the solution." As tension grew in the Armstrong household, Sarah made crucial decisions at the company. After long conversations with her legal and financial advisors, she decided to begin the process of selling the company. It was a painful decision, but necessary to secure her family's future and that of her employees. One night, while everyone was dining in uncomfortable silence, Sarah decided to address the elephant in the room. "I've decided to sell the company," she announced, causing everyone to stop eating and stare at her. James was the first to react. "But Sarah, that company is your life. You can't just." "It's precisely because it's my life that I need to make sure it's in good hands when I'm gone," Sarah interrupted firmly. Michael, who had been unusually quiet in recent days, exploded, "Stop talking like you're already dead. You're going to fight this and you're going to win." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked at her son with a mixture of love and sadness. "Michael, sweetheart, I am fighting. But I also have to be realistic and think about the future." Amy, who had been observing the scene in silence, intervened gently, "I think Sarah is making a very brave decision. We should support her." James abruptly stood up from the table, muttering something about needing fresh air. Michael followed shortly after, leaving Sarah and Amy alone in the dining room. "It's not easy for them," Sarah sighed, feeling the weight of her decision. Amy took her cousin's hand. "No, it's not. But you're doing the right thing, Sarah. And I'll be here to support you every step of the way." As the night progressed, Sarah reflected on the changes her family was experiencing. The illness wasn't just affecting her body, but also the relationships she had built over the years. James grew more distant each day, Michael oscillated between denial and anger, and Amy. Amy had become her rock, her constant in the midst of the storm. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision to sell the company would trigger a series of events that would test the loyalty and love of everyone around her. As she prepared for bed, she couldn't help but wonder, who would really be by her side when things got even harder? The process of selling Sarah's company moved forward steadily, attracting the attention of major international conglomerates. However, while her business empire prepared for a change of hands, her personal life was slowly crumbling. One afternoon, while Sarah was reviewing documents in her study at home, she heard agitated voices coming from the garden. Curious and concerned, she quietly approached the window. What she saw and heard left her frozen. James and Michael were arguing heatedly, unaware of her presence. "I can't believe you're considering this, Dad," Michael shouted, his face red with anger. "It's Mom's money, her legacy." James, with an expression Sarah had never seen before, responded in a low but firm voice, "It's our future, Michael. Do you think it will be easy to maintain this lifestyle without her? We need to make sure those funds don't fall into the wrong hands." Sarah felt breathless. Were they really discussing how to appropriate her money? Was this the man she had shared the last 20 years of her life with? Before she could fully process what she had heard, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Amy, looking at her with a mixture of compassion and anger. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want you to find out like this," Amy whispered. Sarah turned to her cousin, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "You knew?" Amy nodded slowly. "I overheard them a few days ago. I wanted to be sure before telling you." "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry." At that moment, something changed inside Sarah. Sadness gave way to fierce determination. If her own family was willing to betray her like this, she would make sure to protect not only her legacy but also those who had truly supported her. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah, with Amy's discreet help, began making changes to her will and the structure of the company's sale. Every move was carefully calculated to ensure her wishes would be carried out, even after her departure. Meanwhile, James and Michael, unaware they had been discovered, continued their charade of support and concern. Sarah, with a broken heart but a clear mind, played her own part perfectly, hiding the pain and disappointment behind a mask of gratitude. One night, during a family dinner that had become a tense and silent routine, Sarah decided to put her cards on the table. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she began, drawing everyone's attention. "About the company, about our family." James and Michael exchanged nervous glances, while Amy observed in silence. "I've decided to make some changes to my will," Sarah continued, noticing how her husband visibly tensed. "I want to make sure everything ends up in the right hands when I'm gone." "Honey," James interrupted, with a forced smile, "don't you think it's a bit premature to talk about this? We should focus on your recovery." Sarah looked directly into his eyes, allowing a glimpse of her disappointment to reflect in her gaze. "It's never premature to secure the future of those who truly care about me, James." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael, unable to meet his mother's gaze, fixed his eyes on his plate. James, meanwhile, seemed to age 10 years in a matter of seconds. Amy, sensing the tension in the air, tried to change the subject. "Sarah, remember that bucket list we made when we were young? Maybe it's a good time to revisit it." The mention of the bucket list seemed to awaken something in Sarah. Her expression softened slightly. "You're right, Amy. There are so many things I always wanted to do and kept postponing." "What kind of things, Mom?" Michael asked, genuinely curious and perhaps looking for a way to redeem himself. Sarah smiled, a bittersweet smile loaded with nostalgia. "Oh, simple things really. Learning to paint, visiting the small town in Vermont where I grew up, planting a tree in the city park. We could do it together," Michael suggested, with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But before Sarah could respond, James intervened. "Sarah, honey, I don't think it's prudent to make long-term plans in your condition. You should rest." The coldness in James's voice didn't go unnoticed by anyone at the table. Sarah looked at him, a mixture of sadness and determination in her eyes. "Maybe you're right, James. But if not now, when?" That night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, Sarah remained awake, looking out the window at the garden she loved so much. The moon softly illuminated the flowers she had planted with such care over the years. Amy entered the room quietly, sitting next to her cousin on the edge of the bed. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Sarah sighed. "About how people can change, Amy. About how fear and greed can transform those we thought we knew." Amy took Sarah's hand in hers. "Not everyone changes, Sarah. Some of us will be here, no matter what." Sarah smiled through the tears that were beginning to form. "I know. And you don't know how much I appreciate that." At that moment, Sarah made a decision. With Amy's help, she would begin fulfilling those small wishes she had postponed for so long. If she had little time left, she would live it on her own terms. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, James poured himself a glass of whiskey, his mind working frantically on how to secure his financial future. Michael, for his part, lay awake in his bed, tormented by guilt and fear, torn between loyalty to his father and love for his mother. What none of them knew was that Sarah, with her renewed determination, was about to embark on a journey that would not only fulfill her postponed dreams but would also test family bonds in a way none of them could imagine. As the night progressed, the Armstrong mansion sank into a silence loaded with secrets, betrayals, and unexpressed hopes. The future, uncertain and threatening, loomed over them like a storm about to break. Dawn found Sarah awake, with renewed energy that contrasted with her body weakened by illness. With Amy's help, she began planning how to fulfill those dreams she had postponed for so long. "First on the list," said Sarah with a smile, "is learning to paint. I've always wanted to capture the beauty of this garden on canvas." Amy, excited to see her cousin with a new sparkle in her eyes, rushed to make arrangements. Within days, Sarah's study had been transformed into a small art studio, with easels, canvases, and a variety of paints and brushes. Sarah's first painting class was a moment of pure joy. The instructor, a local artist named David, was impressed by her enthusiasm and determination. "You have a natural gift, Sarah," David commented at the end of the class, admiring the sketch she had created. "With practice, you could create truly beautiful works." While Sarah immersed herself in her new hobby, James and Michael observed with a mixture of confusion and wariness. The transformation in Sarah's attitude was evident, and neither of them knew how to react. One afternoon, while Sarah was painting in the garden, Michael approached timidly. "Mom, can I see what you're painting?" Sarah looked at him, surprised but pleased. "Of course, sweetheart. Come, sit with me." Michael observed the canvas, where Sarah had captured the essence of the roses she loved so much. "It's beautiful, Mom. I didn't know you could paint like this." "I didn't know either," Sarah laughed. "I guess it's never too late to discover new talents." For a moment, mother and son shared a connection that seemed lost since long ago. Michael, with tears in his eyes, took his mother's hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. I don't know how to handle all this." Sarah squeezed her son's hand, her heart divided between maternal love and the pain of the betrayal she had witnessed. "Oh, Michael. Life gives us tests that sometimes seem impossible to overcome. But it's our actions that define who we really are." Those words resonated in Michael's mind, planting the seed of a change that was yet to come. Meanwhile, James faced his own demons. Sarah's transformation and Amy's growing presence in their lives filled him with resentment and fear. One night, unable to control his emotions, he confronted Sarah in her bedroom. "What are you doing, Sarah?" he demanded, his voice loaded with frustration. "You should be resting, not playing at being an artist." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of compassion and determination. "I'm not playing, James. I'm living. Something I should have done a long time ago." "And what about us? About our future?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning beyond words. Sarah, with a calmness that surprised even herself, responded. "The future, James, is something we build with our present actions. And right now, I'm building the legacy I want to leave." Those words seemed to hit James like a physical punch. Without saying more, he left the room, leaving Sarah with a mixture of sadness and resolution. The following days saw Sarah embark on more adventures to fulfill her postponed dreams. With Amy always by her side, she visited the small town in Vermont where she had grown up, reconnecting with old friends and places that held precious memories. During one of those visits, while walking through the town square, Sarah stopped in front of an old maple tree. "Remember this tree, Amy?" she asked nostalgically. "This is where we used to sit and dream about our future." Amy smiled, memories flooding her mind. "How could I forget? You wanted to conquer the business world, and You wanted to help others," Sarah completed. "And look where we are now. You, dedicating your life to caring for others, and I." Her voice broke slightly, but Amy hugged her tightly. "And you, Sarah, are still conquering, but this time, you're conquering life itself." That moment of connection strengthened the bond between the cousins even more, a tie that had become Sarah's anchor in the midst of the storm that was her life. Back in Boston, Sarah decided to fulfill another of her dreams, planting a tree in the city park. With the help of Amy and, surprisingly, Michael, who volunteered, Sarah planted a young oak tree. While they patted the earth around the tree, Sarah looked at her son with a mixture of pride and hope. "This tree, Michael, will grow strong and tall. And though I won't be here to see it, it will be a reminder that life continues, always renewing itself." Michael, moved by his mother's words and the symbolic act of planting life, hugged Sarah tightly. "I promise I'll take care of it, Mom. Always." That promise, simple but profound, was a turning point in the relationship between mother and son. Sarah saw in Michael's eyes a glimpse of the compassionate and strong young man she knew he could become. While the Armstrong family navigated these turbulent waters, the sale of Sarah's company reached its final phase. The offers had exceeded all expectations, ensuring a stable financial future. But for Sarah, the real value wasn't in the bank account numbers, but in the moments she was creating and the lessons she was leaving behind. One night, while reviewing the final sale documents with her trusted lawyer, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of events. "I want to make some changes to the distribution of funds," she announced firmly. The lawyer looked at her surprised. "Are you sure, Mrs. Armstrong? The current terms are already quite generous to your family." Sarah smiled, a smile that mixed determination and a touch of sadness. "I'm sure. The time has come to ensure that my legacy is in the right hands. While the lawyer took note of Sarah's new wishes, she looked out the window at the garden she loved so much. The sun was setting, painting the sky in reddish and golden hues, as if nature itself wanted to create a work of art for her. At that moment, Sarah knew that, despite the challenges and betrayals, she had found a peace she had never experienced before. With each dream fulfilled, with each moment lived fully, she was writing the end of her story on her own terms. What Sarah didn't know was that her actions were about to trigger a series of events that would test family bonds like never before, revealing hidden truths and forcing each member of the Armstrong family to face their own demons. The news of the sale of Sarah's company spread quickly through Boston's business circles. What began as whispered rumors soon became headlines in local newspapers: Armstrong Empire changes hands, $1 billion transaction. James, who had been distant and worried in recent days, abruptly entered Sarah's studio one morning, waving a newspaper in his hand. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice trembling with rage and fear. "You sold the company without consulting me?" Sarah, who was working on a new painting, looked at him calmly. "Yes, James. The sale has been finalized. How could you do this? That company was our future, our security." "No, James," Sarah responded firmly. "That company was my creation, my legacy. And I've decided to make sure that legacy is used in the right way." The tension in the room was palpable. James, unable to control his frustration, exploded. "And what about us? About Michael? Have you thought about how we'll live without the company's income?" Sarah slowly stood up, facing her husband with a dignity that contrasted with her weakened body. "I've thought about everything, James. Including how you and Michael plan to secure your future behind my back." The color drained from James's face. "What? What do you mean?" "I heard you, James. You and Michael, discussing how to appropriate my money. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The silence that followed was deafening. James, caught in his own trap, stammered, trying to justify himself. "Sarah, you don't understand. We were scared, worried about the future. I just wanted—" "What did you want, James?" interrupted Sarah, her voice laden with pain and disappointment. "To make sure you could maintain your lifestyle even after my death." At that moment, Michael entered the room, drawn by the raised voices. Seeing the scene before him, his face filled with shame and remorse. "Mom, he began, but Sarah raised a hand to stop him. "Michael, your father and I are having an important conversation. Please leave us alone." But Michael, gathering all his courage, stepped forward. "No, Mom. I need to say this. What we did. What we planned. It was wrong. Terribly wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tears were flowing freely down Michael's face as he confessed. James, meanwhile, seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. Sarah looked at her son, seeing in him a spark of the goodness she had always believed he possessed. "Michael, I appreciate your honesty. But apologies, though important, don't erase actions." Turning to James, she continued, "I've taken measures to ensure my legacy is used in the way I see fit. Most of the funds from the sale will go to charities and to securing the future of those employees who have been loyal to the company over the years." James paled even more. "What do you mean? What about us?" "You will receive enough to live comfortably, but not in the luxury you're accustomed to. You'll have to learn to stand on your own feet, to build your own path." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. James, unable to process the news, stumbled out, muttering about talking to lawyers and fighting the decision. Michael, however, remained. With tears in his eyes, he approached his mother. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I understand what you've done and why you've done it. And I'm proud of you." Sarah, moved by the sincerity in her son's voice, hugged him. "Oh, Michael. There's still so much you can learn and so much good you can do in this world. Don't waste that opportunity." While mother and son shared that moment of reconciliation, Amy entered the room quietly. She had heard much of the confrontation, and her heart swelled with pride for her cousin's strength. "Sarah," she said softly, "are you okay?" Sarah gently separated from Michael and smiled at Amy. Yes, I'm fine. In fact, I feel lighter than I have in years. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and changes in the Armstrong house. James, consumed by anger and frustration, spent most of his time away from home, presumably looking for ways to contest Sarah's decision. Michael, on the other hand, seemed to have experienced a transformation. He spent more time with his mother, listening to her stories, learning from her experiences, and slowly rediscovering the relationship they had lost. One afternoon, while Sarah and Amy enjoyed tea in the garden, Sarah shared surprising news. I've decided to donate a significant portion of the funds to establish an art foundation, she announced with a smile. I want to create opportunities for others to discover the joy I found in painting. Amy looked at her with admiration. Sarah, that's wonderful. You're creating a legacy that goes beyond money or business. And there's something else, continued Sarah, taking her cousin's hand. I want you to be an integral part of this foundation. Your compassion and strength are exactly what's needed to guide it. Amy, surprised and excited, hugged Sarah tightly. Oh, Sarah. I don't know what to say. It's such an honor and a huge responsibility. I know you'll do wonderfully, Sarah responded with confidence. I trust you more than anyone in this world. While the cousins shared that moment of connection and planning for the future, they didn't notice Michael observing them from the house window. The young man, seeing the goodness and strength of his mother and aunt, made a decision that would change the course of his life. That night, during dinner, Michael made an announcement that surprised everyone. I've decided to drop out of business school, he said with determination. I want to study social work. I want to make a difference in people's lives, like you have, Mom. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of a glass shattering on the floor. James, who had been drinking more than usual in recent days, looked at his son with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. Social work, he spat. Have you lost your mind? How do you expect to maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to with a job like that? But before Michael could respond, Sarah intervened. I'm proud of you, Michael. You've chosen a difficult but noble path. The tension at the table was palpable. James, unable to control his anger, stood up abruptly. This is madness. First you, he said pointing at Sarah, give away our fortune, and now you, turning to Michael, decide to throw your future away. I won't allow it. With those words, James stormed out of the house, leaving his family in stunned silence. Sarah, feeling her time growing shorter, looked at her son and Amy. There's so much I still need to tell you, so much I need to make sure you understand. And so, as the night progressed, Sarah began to share her deepest thoughts, her hopes, and her fears. It was as if, at last, all masks had fallen, allowing the truth, in all its raw beauty, to come to light. None of them knew that this night of revelations and decisions would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that would test their love, loyalty, and capacity to forgive and grow. The days that followed the family confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. The Armstrong mansion, once a symbol of success and family unity, now seemed like an emotional battlefield where each inhabitant struggled with their own demons. James, consumed by anger and resentment, had temporarily moved to a hotel downtown. His attempts to legally contest Sarah's decisions met with an insurmountable wall. Everything was meticulously documented and completely legal. One morning, while Sarah was painting in her studio-turned-art workshop, she received an unexpected visit. It was Rachel, her faithful assistant from the company for so many years. Mrs. Armstrong, said Rachel with tears in her eyes, I just found out about everything you've done for us, for the employees. I don't know how to thank you. Sarah smiled warmly, setting aside her brushes. There's nothing to thank me for, Rachel. You were the heart of the company all these years. It's the least I could do. Rachel, taking Sarah's hands in hers, continued, but it's not just that. Your decision to create the Art Foundation. It's inspiring so many. There are already groups of employees organizing to volunteer their time. This news filled Sarah's heart with a joy she hadn't felt in a long time. Her legacy wouldn't just survive, it would flourish in ways she had never imagined. Meanwhile, Michael immersed himself in his new passion with a fervor that surprised everyone. He spent hours researching social work programs, visiting charitable organizations, and talking with professionals in the field. One afternoon, while sharing his discoveries with Sarah and Amy in the garden, his eyes shone with a determination that reminded Sarah of her younger self. "Mom, Aunt Amy, there's so much to do, so many lives we can touch," Michael exclaimed enthusiastically. "I'm thinking of specializing in programs for at-risk youth. I want to be part of the change." Sarah, though weakened by her illness, felt a surge of pride and hope. "Oh, Michael," she said with a trembling voice, "you don't know how much it means to me to see you like this. You found your purpose." Amy, always the voice of reason and support, added, "And you won't be alone on this path, Michael. Your mother's foundation will be a great ally in your efforts." The conversation was interrupted by James's unexpected arrival. His disheveled appearance and red eyes evidenced the difficult days he had been experiencing. "We need to talk," he said hoarsely, addressing Sarah. Amy and Michael exchanged concerned looks, but Sarah nodded calmly. "All right. Let's go to my studio." Once alone, the silence between them was laden with years of love, but also recent betrayals and disappointments. James was the first to speak. "I've lost everything, Sarah. My wife, my son, my lifestyle. Is this what you wanted? To see me destroyed?" Sarah looked at him with a mixture of compassion and firmness. "No, James. I never wanted to see you destroyed. I wanted you to see beyond money and status. I wanted you to remember the man I fell in love with so many years ago." These words seemed to penetrate the armor of anger James had built. His shoulders slumped and, for the first time in weeks, tears began to flow freely. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" he sobbed. "I was so blinded by the fear of losing what we had that I didn't realize I was losing what was most important, you, Michael, our family." Sarah, moved by her husband's vulnerability, approached and took his hands. "James, it's never too late to change, to rediscover what really matters." "But how?" asked James, his voice broken with emotion. "How can I repair all the damage I've caused?" "By starting to forgive yourself," Sarah responded softly. "And then, day by day, with actions that show you've understood what really matters in life." That conversation marked a turning point for James. In the following days, he made efforts to reconnect with his family. Although the path wasn't easy, with Michael still wary and Amy cautious, slowly the bridges that seemed irreparably broken began to be rebuilt. One morning, James surprised everyone by announcing that he had been researching ways to contribute to Sarah's art foundation. "I've been thinking," he said during family breakfast, now a renewed tradition, "about how I can help. I have contacts in the business world who could be useful in securing sponsorships and support for the foundation." Sarah and Amy exchanged looks of surprise and caution, but it was Michael who spoke first. "Dad, that would be amazing," he said with a tentative smile. "Actually, I was thinking about how we could expand the programs to include art workshops for homeless youth." And so, little by little, the Armstrong family began to heal and unite around a common purpose, the legacy of love and service that Sarah was building. However, the shadow of Sarah's illness remained present, a constant reminder that time was precious. Each day became a struggle between her determination to see her dreams realized and the fatigue that invaded her body. One afternoon, while Sarah rested in the garden, surrounded by the flowers she loved so much, she called Amy to her side. "Amy, my dear Amy," she said with a soft but firm voice, "I need you to promise me something." Amy took her cousin's hand in hers. "Anything, Sarah. Anything. Promise me that, no matter what happens, you'll keep this family together. That you'll guide Michael on his new path, that you'll help James rediscover his best self. And above all, that you'll keep the spirit of the foundation alive." With tears in her eyes, Amy nodded solemnly. "I promise you, Sarah. With all my heart." That night, as the moon softly illuminated the Armstrongs' garden, Sarah sat in her studio to write. She knew her time was growing shorter, and there were words that needed to be said, truths that needed to be shared. She wrote 3 letters, one for James, one for Michael, and one for Amy. In each, she poured her heart, her love, her hopes, and her final wishes. These letters would become her last gift, her final legacy to those she loved most. As dawn approached, Sarah looked out the window at the garden she loved so much. A deep peace invaded her, knowing that, despite the challenges and betrayals, she had managed to create something beautiful and lasting. What Sarah didn't know was that her actions had triggered a series of events that would continue long after her departure, transforming not just her family, but the entire Boston community. Her legacy was about to flourish in ways that not even she could imagine. The dawn that followed Sarah's passing was one of the saddest Boston had seen in a long time. The news of her death spread quickly, touching the hearts of all those who had been impacted by her generosity and vision. In the Armstrong mansion, the silence was deafening. James, Michael, and Amy were in Sarah's studio, surrounded by her paintings and memories, when the family lawyer arrived with the letters Sarah had left for each of them. With trembling hands, each took their envelope. Amy was the first to open it, her eyes filling with tears as she read her dear cousin's words. "My beloved Amy. You have been my rock, my confidant, my sister in everything but blood. I leave you the greatest responsibility of all, keeping my dream alive. The foundation is now yours to lead and grow. I trust your heart and your judgment to take it places I couldn't even imagine. Take care of James and Michael, help them find their way. And above all, live, Amy. Live with the passion and love you've always had in your heart. With all my love. Sarah." Michael, with tears streaming down his cheeks, read his letter aloud. "My dear son. I am so proud of the man you are becoming. Your decision to dedicate your life to serving others is the greatest gift you could have given me. Follow that path, Michael. It will change your life and the lives of countless others. I leave you my collection of paintings, each one has a story, a lesson. Learn them, share them. And always remember that true success is measured by the positive impact we leave on others. I love you infinitely. Mom." James, with shaking hands, opened his letter. His voice broke several times as he read. "James, my love. Our path together has been long and not always easy. But I want you to know that, despite everything, the love we shared was real and beautiful. I forgive you, James. And I hope you can forgive yourself. You have the opportunity to reinvent yourself, to rediscover the man I fell in love with so many years ago. Use your talents for good, support our son on his new path, and find happiness in life's simple things. That is my last request for you. With eternal love. Sarah." The silence that followed was broken by the contained sobs of all three. In that moment, united by grief and love, they embraced, forming a circle that Sarah would have loved to see. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. Sarah's funeral became a celebration of her life and legacy. Hundreds attended, from employees of her former company to local artists and beneficiaries of her newly created foundation. Amy, true to her promise, took the reins of the Sarah Armstrong Foundation for the Arts. With unwavering determination, she began implementing the programs Sarah had dreamed of and developing new projects. One of the first projects was the creation of a scholarship program for young artists from low-income backgrounds. Michael, inspired by his mother's vision, became actively involved, working side by side with Amy to identify promising talents in marginalized communities. James, for his part, faced the biggest challenge of his life, reinventing himself. He began attending therapy, confronting his fears and insecurities. Little by little, he rediscovered his passion for architecture, a dream he had abandoned years ago in pursuit of a life of luxury. One day, while helping Amy with some foundation matters, James had an epiphany. "What do you think about designing a community cultural center?" he proposed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "It could be a space where young artists can create, exhibit, and teach." Amy looked at him with a mixture of surprise and joy. "James, that's brilliant. It's exactly the kind of project Sarah would have loved." And so, the Sarah Armstrong Cultural Center began to take shape. James spent months designing a building that would not only be functional but also a work of art in itself, incorporating elements from Sarah's favorite paintings into its architecture. Michael, meanwhile, immersed himself in his social work studies, complementing them with volunteer work at the foundation. His unique perspective as someone who had grown up in privilege but chose to serve others inspired many of his classmates. One afternoon, while supervising an art workshop for homeless children, Michael met Emma, a young social worker with a contagious passion for helping others. The connection between them was instant and deep, based on shared values and the desire to make the world a better place. As months passed, the impact of the Sarah Armstrong Foundation became increasingly evident in Boston. The city's walls filled with colorful murals, products of urban art workshops. Pop-up galleries appeared in previously forgotten neighborhoods, giving voice and visibility to emerging artists. The day of the Sarah Armstrong Cultural Center's inauguration was a celebration that Boston wouldn't forget. Amy, James, and Michael cut the ribbon together, symbolizing the family unity that Sarah had so desired to see. While touring the facilities, filled with enthusiastic students and inspiring artwork, Amy couldn't help but think of her cousin. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered to herself, "if only you could see this. Your dream has become reality." That night, during the inaugural gala, Michael took the stage to give a speech. With an emotional but firm voice, he shared, "My mother, Sarah Armstrong, taught us that true legacy isn't measured in money or possessions, but in the lives we touch and improve. This center, this foundation, are testimony to that belief. But my mother's real legacy lives in each of us, in the decisions we make every day to make this world a better place." His words were received with a standing ovation, many in the audience wiping away tears of emotion. As the celebration continued, James approached Amy, who was observing a beautiful mural inspired by one of Sarah's last paintings. "You know," James said softly, "there was a time when I thought I had lost everything. But now I realize that Sarah left us the most precious gift of all, a purpose." Amy nodded, taking James's hand in a gesture of understanding and forgiveness. She always knew how to see the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. As the night progressed, Sarah's presence seemed to fill every corner of the cultural center. Her spirit of love, creativity, and service lived in every brushstroke, in every smile, in every life touched by her legacy. What no one knew at that moment was that Sarah Armstrong's impact was just beginning to be felt. Her vision of a more compassionate and creative world would continue inspiring future generations, creating ripples of change that would extend far beyond the limits of Boston. And so, in the heart of the city, a legacy of love, art, and hope flourished, a living testimony that a single life, lived with purpose and compassion, can change the world. 10 years had passed since Sarah Armstrong's departure, and Boston had transformed in ways no one could have imagined. The Sarah Armstrong Cultural Center had become the beating heart of an artistic and social revolution that had changed the face of the city. On a sunny spring morning, Amy walked through the center's hallways, her footsteps echoing softly on the marble. At 55, her hair showed silver streaks, but her eyes shone with the same determination and love that had always characterized her. She stopped in front of a large portrait of Sarah, painted by one of the foundation's first beneficiaries. "Oh, Sarah," she murmured with a smile, "if you could see all this now." The sound of children's laughter pulled her from her thoughts. A group of kids ran past, their faces lit up with the excitement of artistic creation. Amy followed them to a spacious studio where Michael, now 38, was leading an art therapy workshop. "Remember," Michael was saying to the children, "there are no mistakes in art, only opportunities to create something unique." Amy watched proudly as her nephew had become a pillar of the community. His work combining art and social work had helped thousands of young people find hope and purpose. Across the studio, Emma, now Michael's wife, worked with a group of teenagers on a community mural project. Their love had flourished over the years, strengthened by their shared passion for service. Amy approached Michael when the workshop ended. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she said, hugging him. Michael smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. "You know, Aunt Amy, there's something Emma and I wanted to tell you." He paused, his smile widening. "We're going to be parents. And if it's a girl, we want to name her Sarah." Amy felt her heart fill with joy. "Oh, Michael, that's wonderful. Your mother. She would be so happy." As they celebrated the news, James entered the studio. At 70, he moved more slowly, but his face radiated a peace that had taken years to find. "What did I miss?" he asked, noticing the emotion in the air. When Michael shared the news, James hugged him tightly. "A grandchild," he murmured, his voice laden with emotion. "Sarah always said that life has a beautiful way of surprising us." The years hadn't been easy for James. After Sarah's death, he had struggled with depression and remorse. But with his family's support and therapy, he had found a new purpose. Now he dedicated his time to teaching architecture to underprivileged youth, helping them design solutions to improve their communities. That afternoon, the family gathered in the garden of the old Armstrong mansion, now converted into an annex of the cultural center. Amy had maintained the garden exactly as Sarah had liked it, an oasis of color and life in the heart of the city. While sharing stories and laughter, remembering Sarah and celebrating the new lives to come, Amy couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey they had undertaken. "You know," she said, drawing everyone's attention, 10 years ago, when Sarah left us, I thought nothing would ever be the same. And I was right, but not in the way I imagined. Her departure changed us all, made us grow in ways we never expected." James nodded, his eyes filled with a regret that, though no longer consuming him, would never completely leave him. "Sarah saw the best in each of us, even when we didn't deserve it. She gave us a second chance, not just us, but the entire community." Michael, with his arm around Emma, added, "And now we have the responsibility to continue her legacy, to ensure future generations understand the power of art, compassion, and service." As the sun began to set, bathing the garden in golden and pink hues, Amy proposed a toast. Raising their glasses, each shared a favorite memory of Sarah. James recalled the first time he saw her paint, the passion in her eyes that had made him fall in love. Michael spoke of the nights when his mother would read him stories, teaching him about kindness and courage. Emma, though she had never met Sarah in person, shared how her mother-in-law's stories had inspired her to dedicate her life to serving others. And Amy, with tears in her eyes, remembered the last conversation she had with her cousin, the promise she had made that had guided her actions over the past decade. When silence fell over the group, a soft breeze stirred the flowers in the garden, filling the air with a sweet fragrance. For a moment, they all felt Sarah's presence, as if she were there with them, smiling and nodding in approval.